Welcome to the Patriotic Pulpit. Have you considered the fact that what is happening at the southern border is actually Biden's planned invasion of America? Up to this point, here in February of 2024, there are approximately 6.2 million people that have come into the United States illegally since Joe Biden took office. That does not include the 1.7 million known gotaways. That equals almost 10 million people coming into the United States under the leadership of Joe Biden. It is a planned border invasion. It is not incompetence. It is a planned invasion of America to turn America upside down. And unless Americans can get hold of this, and the states such as Texas and Arizona can get hold of this, and all of the states, even up to the middle of the country and even in New York, if they cannot get hold of this, then we are done as a nation. There's not going to be any more free election. There's not going to be any more government of and by and for the people. It will be a government of and by and for illegal aliens. And that's exactly what's happening under the leadership of Joe Biden because the Democrats want it that way. I want to consider two or three things here today. Number one, I want to talk about the border lies that are told and simply just go through some of the lies that the Biden administration continues to put out regarding their handling of the border. Then number two, I want to look at an article that was published in Epoch Times regarding what is actually happening and who are some of the players behind the scenes regarding it. We'll talk about some of that in both of these segments. So the border lies include, number one, the lie that was continually told that the border is closed. That was, of course, Mayorkas tells us that. Joe Biden told us that. Kamala Harris told us that. The administration continued to lie, and everybody knows that it is absolutely a lie. Number two, one of the lies that I continue to hear on mainstream media and on Fox News also is that the system is broken. The system is broken. The system is broken. We'll talk about that lie. That is a flat-footed lie. Number three, Biden wants the power to close the border. So he said in a recent interview the other day, it was actually when he was walking with an ice cream cone in his hand, about to spill it on his shoes and on his tie, he said, give me the power to close the border and I'll close it. That's all an absolute lie. Number four, another lie is that most illegals come here to work and they need to work and they're refugees. They're being persecuted in the country and they want to work. We'll talk about that lie in just a moment. We'll talk about the prevarication regarding this is an organic surge. We are led to believe by the mainstream media that this is all something that is happening in the countries where the point of origin, where these people are coming from, over 160 countries, people coming here, and the point of origin, we're told, well, this is organically, they're just coming here, and that's just the way the world is working out at this point. That is absolutely putting your head in the sand and not even knowing anything about what's happening in our own government and with the United Nations. And the number 6 point is, and I get tired of hearing this, Biden's failure, Biden's incompetence. Biden is incompetent, Biden has failed. That is also a lie. He is tremendously successful. He's doing exactly what he wants to do. And the administration is pulling the strings to make him. He, of course, is personally incompetent. He personally is indeed a failure. He personally is someone who can't put things together, can't string a sentence together. That's true. But to think that his administration or his plan is simply a failure, no, not true. This is a planned invasion of America. So let's look at some of these lies that have been told, and we'll talk about the truth. Number one, the border is secure. That absolutely is a flat-footed lie. Biden specifically stated during the campaign for president that all people in these foreign countries should surge to the border. He asked for the surge. He used that word. I'm quoting directly. He wanted a surge to the border. He also promised that he would not deport people who are here illegally if all they did was illegally cross the border. He said he would not deport them. He telegraphed to the entire world that they should now start coming to the border as soon as he was elected, and absolutely that is what happened. Number two, I hear, well, the system is broken. The system is broken. We hear, well, the system is broken. We've got to fix the system. Ladies and gentlemen, that is absolutely a yellow-backed idea. That is a yellow-spined idea to say the system is broken. The truth of the matter is we have so many people who are too weak to actually implement the system that is in place. We lack the will. The laws are in place. No new laws are needed. We could right now shut the border down. The president can shut the border down. Congress can shut the border down. The government can shut the border down. The reason they don't do it is because we don't have strong enough people in Congress to do it, or not enough strong people to do it. We lack the willpower to implement the laws that are already on the books. I have been crying about the border myself. From the state of Arizona, now in the state of Texas, since the time I have been a teenager in the 1970s, I knew the border was, we didn't have the willpower, seemingly at that point, to enforce our own laws. And we continue to allow illegals to come up here into the United States and to work. And there were a lot of young people, such as myself, who couldn't even get a job. In some places in Arizona outside of Phoenix, couldn't even get a job because they were all taken by illegals coming up here. So I couldn't even get a job. You know, not everybody was on pot. Not everybody was on weed. As in the 1970s, some of us abstained from it completely, and there are many of us who wanted to go out and actually work. But we could not get a job because, after all, the minimum wage at the time was, what, $2.50 an hour or whatever? I thought, well, I get $2 an hour going out picking fruit outside in Higley in Arizona. No, that's not going to be the case. They've already hired 30 illegals who are working 50 cents an hour. Why didn't we stop it back then? We didn't stop it back then because we didn't want to. The laws were on the books. They have always been on the books. And we have not enough congressmen with a backbone to do it. Too many people with yellow spines. Number three lie. Biden needs the power. He said recently when he was an ice cream interview. He has all these ice cream interviews. I don't decry him of ice cream, and I don't want to defraud him of that. But, he doesn't do any really press briefings. He just does a little snippet as he walks to the helicopter that no one can hear anything he says, and he can't put ideas together anyway. But he said, give me the power. Give me the power. What a grand fabrication. Biden came to office saying that the Trump border policy is cruel and reckless. We have Democrats right now who are out there telling us that they want to eliminate ICE. There are many people in the majority of Americans, in the majority of the Democratic Party rather, who tell us, let's eliminate ICE. That is, we don't want the Immigration and Customs Enforcement. We don't want enforcement. When Biden was a candidate, he said, no one should be subject to deportation who simply breaks our laws to get here. No, Biden doesn't need the power to do it. He wants more power in order to exacerbate the problem and to fast track us into oblivion as a nation. That's what he wants. And sadly, many Republicans are wanting to help him at that. I heard Maria Harp, who worked in the Obama administration, on Fox News the other day saying she got all excited about this. She said, well, Biden has put forth the strongest border policy ever for any Democrat or any Republican, and the Republicans under the leadership of Donald Trump, who's supposedly pulling strings behind the scenes, tells them no, they don't want to go for it. What? She pretends that we're all stupid. This new bill that was Republican and Democrat sponsored in the Senate is not about enforcing the border. It's about letting up to 5,000 illegals come in per day. It's about rubber stamping what is already going on. And Biden said, if you give me this bill, I will shut the border down. So he can shut it. He just doesn't want to. And I get so tired Why do we even have the Maria Harps, who are going to be shills for the great big liars in the Democratic Party on Fox News, going to pipe their ideas? That's absolutely absurd. No, Biden doesn't need the power. He has the power to do it. He doesn't want to do it. How about this one? Most illegals come here to work. I heard that from one of our state representatives the other day. Now, let's all be clear about this. Most illegals come here to work. Who knows? Who knows? If you give them more money on a welfare ticket to get over here, pay for the travel expenses, pay for the hospitalization, pay for their schooling, pay for everything, housing, food stamps, you pay for everything out of the pocket of the American taxpayer. You give them so much money. Who knows whether they come here to work? You can't make that determination. There may be some who are out working. There may be a lot of them out working. That's true. But the people coming in here under this border surge, this crashing of the gates of America, such as the Visigoths did to Rome, sponsored by the American taxpayer through Joe Biden, it comes with very little grace for us to say, well, they come here to work. You don't know that. I'll tell you what to do. Let's put this to the test. I challenge our state representatives, our federal representatives, our state senators, our state representatives to do this test. You cut off every bit of financial aid to everybody coming over here, and even when they get in here, cut off all the financial aid. No NGOs, no Catholic charities, nothing. Make it illegal for them to receive $1 of American money. And we will see how many people come to work. I'll tell you what, I can bet my bottom dollar that would stem the tide of illegal immigration immediately here. Remember this also. They are illegal. Why are they qualified to receive money? Biden stated as a candidate, give illegals free health care. That was telegraphed to the world. Give them free health care. Who's going to pay for it? Joe Biden? No, he wants Bill Aqua to pay for it. That's what he wants. And he's using government force to redistribute the wealth to do it, which is an ungodly, immoral system to begin with. Then how about this one? This is an organic surge. That is, people are so persecuted and they're so downtrodden and they're so poor in other countries that they need to come over here. And this is an organic surge. And this is something that they've all decided to do on their own. You know what? There are so many poor people in America. I'm a Christian. I want to help people. We help people in the church. We help people all the time. But that is my voluntary contribution. But it is not, first of all, help. In a biblical sense, it is not giving. It is not free will contribution for the government to take it out of your pocket and put it into someone else's pocket. That is not contributing. That is not free will contribution. That is theft. That is what it is. But this is all false to say that it is an organic surge. It is absolutely manufactured. We'll talk about that in a moment. But notice this, what Biden said specifically. This is in 2019. The date was February 29th. That would be a day after tomorrow. I would make sure that we immediately surge to the border. Does that sound like this is an organic? No, he's inviting people to come. That's what's happening. It's not an organic surge. Consider this one also. Here's another lie. We'll take a break in a moment. Biden is incompetent. Biden is incompetent. Biden doesn't know what he's doing. Ladies and gentlemen, are we putting our heads in the sand? No, this is planned. This is the planned invasion of America. FDR said, in politics, nothing happens by accident, and that's exactly right. Nothing is happening by accident. It is not just happening. Biden, when he first came into office, these are the some of the steps that he took on day one of office. He implemented over 500 actions since day one, but on day one, he began implementing various actions on immigration in the first 3 years, according to the Migration Policy Institute. Get that number, 500 different actions he began to implement. Day one, for example, he ended the national emergency on the border. Trump had, it is a national emergency, and it was so treated by our government. He ended that. So no, we're not going to treat it as an emergency. Number two, he reversed the ban on travelers from terrorist countries. There are many countries that are on the terrorist watch list, and we had people flooding into this country from those countries on the terrorist watch list, and he said, no, that is inconsistent with American values. That's day one. He suspended deportation of illegals for 100 days. He executive ordered to strengthen the DACA program, the Deferred Action on Children Arrivals. He stopped the Remain in Mexico policy that Trump had in place. He widened the asylum definitions. He loosened the criteria on what is asylum seeker. Why did he do this? To enable the gates to be open wide. He required the State Department to advance reforms in Central America. Now, what does that mean, advance reforms in Central America? You see, it's not good enough that they steal from the American taxpayer and give it to all the people coming to America and coming across the border. Now we're going to have to, well, Kamala Harris has gone down to Central America, said, we need to help fix the systemic problem there. Really? Why don't we start by shutting the border? And you, Kamala Harris, and you, Joe Biden, who take all the millions of dollars from China, why don't you give your money to Central America? Because that's what they mean. They mean give your money to Central American countries because that will cause them to want to stay in their country when they have more money there. So, yeah, oh yeah, there we go. American taxpayer, pony up. The Heritage Foundation criticized the bill that we're talking about for prioritizing illegal aliens, smugglers, cartels, and gangs over Americans. Now, that's what the Biden administration has done, had prioritized all of these illegals and thugs over Americans. That's why people in Chicago are crying out. New York are crying out. And the Democratic mayors there hardly know what to do because Joe Biden has sponsored it all the way. Biden also initiated programs to unify families that were separated. That is, people here in America, illegal, will bring all of the family over here. And by the way, we need to end that anchor baby policy while we're at it. How about this one? The Department of Homeland Security set new criteria for ICE agents. If they encounter illegals, then there are certain restrictions upon what kind of illegal alien they are, whether they can actually implement holding proceedings, deportation proceedings. They set up new criteria for ICE agents. You know, it's like in the school system where I was. Kids are out of control. Teachers want to get hold of the kids in the classroom, get hold of the classroom itself. But, oh no, you can't do anything. You can't touch them. You can't do anything at all. And they take away every single leverage point that a teacher has to control a classroom. So what do you have in the classroom? That's right, chaos. Not even controlled chaos in many cases. Same thing going on at the border. How about Biden falsely accusing the Border Patrol agents of whipping Haitians? Remember that scenes on the horses? He falsely accused them. He'd never apologized for it. So I said this is a planned invasion. You and I are bankrolling it right now. How so? Because the money that is taken out of the United States taxpayer pocket is given to the United Nations. That is through a backdoor program. So what's happening here? The Biden administration has upped the ante. We used to give, for example, $500 million to the USA, or rather to the United Nations programs, which includes a IOM, that's the International Office on Migration. Give $500 million or $500 million to that office. When Biden came in, he put up to $1.3 billion. That was more than twice as much as it was, giving to that IOM office. Why was that done? In order that we might be able to sponsor the credit cards, the debit cards that illegals have, give them money in the point of origin that they might come over here. And so Amy Pope, who is the IOM director, said at the United Nations, all of this is good for the United States. So did Joe Biden. This is what we need to do. So to shield it from the examination of the mainstream media, Joe Biden gives taxpayer money over there through the United Nations, through the office of the IOM, and they give it to illegals to sponsor them to come to the United States. We are sponsoring our own demise. That's what's happening here. And what is the motive for all of this? The Democratic Party hates America. That's why. They telegraph it all the time. When Joe Biden gets up with the big red background, he talks about his what's the number one enemy they always talk about? What is that number one enemy? Yes, that's right. White nationalism. White nationalism. We've got to get rid of whites. We got to water it down, and we got to get rid of white and Christian nationalism. As a matter of fact, that's caught on so much now that Joy Behar and all the people talking about that's the Christian white nationalism. That's the big problem. They don't like Christianity. They don't like the principles of Christianity. No one that I know and I've ever read after wants a Christian nationalist organization or country. But we do believe that this country was founded upon Christian principles and should return to it. But they see that as the number one enemy. So what are they going to do? They're going to absolutely crash the gates like the Visigoths did Rome. And they're doing it right now because they hate white Christian America. That's what's going on. We'll be back in just a moment. For the next 10 minutes, I want to continue regarding Biden's planned border invasion, the destruction of America, crashing the gates of America. What a sad, sad episode we are in regarding the history of America. This is an article that was published by Epoch Times just this week, and it just supports all that we have been talking about already. Former Panama border chief says that the United Nations is behind the Mexico border. Panama's former Senafront director says the UN and its nonprofit partners made mass migration worse when they moved into his country. The article is by Darlene McCormick Sanchez. It was published February 22. So let me back up and let's give us a background regarding the United Nations. The United Nations was conceived to be a world government from the time of Woodrow Wilson. Woodrow Wilson wanted it. They called it the League of Nations. But there were several senators that were conservative that did not want it because they recognized we would be giving away our sovereignty to a world body. Edward Mandell House, Woodrow Wilson's chief of staff and right-hand man, had planned it. He was a Marxist. He claimed he was a Marxist. He wrote a book called Philip Drew, Administrator, in which he claimed that he wanted Marxism as designed by Karl Marx right here in America. But we're going to get it by a world government. But that was shot down, the League of Nations, and Woodrow Wilson was upset. So they went to the drawing board and they came up with two organizations, Edward Mandell House did, the International Institute of Royal Affairs in England and the Council on Foreign Relations in America. Both of these organizations were to create now the groundwork, soften America to a world government and get it going in that direction. The Council on Foreign Relations is all about world government. So if your senator is a part of the CFR, you need to get him out of office. Mac Thornberry, who was our representative from this area, was one of those. He's part of the Council on Foreign Relations. But be that as it may, that's another story for another day. But that's what they got going. So finally, they got to the drawing board, and after World War II, got crammed into that war, and now we've got to do something to ostensibly stop the war in the world. And so the United Nations was created. But you can't sell the American people in the 1940s, particularly on world government, can you? No. Especially since it's a world socialist government. That's what it's all about, socialism. We can't do that. So we're going to have to sell the American people on the idea that the United Nations is, oh, that's right, it's to keep us from getting into war. It's to make sure that wars do not occur. That's how it was sold. That, of course, is once again a grand lie. We have been in a war ever since the UN was created, and we have had billions upon billions of taxpayer dollars siphoned from the United States and put in all these foreign countries, all over Europe, all over the world. We have bases everywhere in the world because we have now, as one of the creators of the United Nations, I think it was Harry Dexter White in the FDR administration, said, you know what, we're tired of the idea of everybody in America doing well and everybody else over there not doing so well. Well, the answer to that was, why don't they recreate the same kind of government that we have today? And that would have worked well. But no, they didn't want to recreate that kind of government at all. Instead, they want to take that which the riches of America, created because of freedom in our government, allowed us to unleash the freedom of Americans and siphon it off. And that's what the United Nations has done and is continuing to do today. So, exactly so, the border crisis, the border surge, the crashing of the gates of Rome here is sponsored by you and me, the American taxpayers. And it is funneled by the Biden administration through the United Nations in order to break down America. So Darlene Sanchez writes the following. The former director of Panama's Border Patrol told the Epoch Times that the United Nations migration agenda is behind the chaos at the U.S. southern border and that the UN partners are making things worse instead of better. That is simply verifying what we've already been talking about. Oriel Ortega, now a security and defense consultant to the Panamanian President Cortizo, said in a February 22 interview that was last week that he saw a jump in migration in 2016 organizations at the same time that there were more non-governmental organizations, NGOs, were moving into Panama. These NGOs, non-governmental organizations, it's a cloak and dagger system that they have all the money funneled to them, governmental organizations, but they're non-governmental organizations, so government funnels money to them, the Catholic Church and so forth, and they are now sponsoring the chaos at the border. That increase corresponded with the UN's Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration meeting in 2016. Now, just stop and think about that. The United Nations Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, Regular Migration met in 2016, and the question was, how are we going to migrate millions of people into America and crash the gates? Well, 2 years later, writes the author, 152 nations, including Panama, voted in favor of the compact to manage global migration. So we've signed on through the UN to let the UN manage global migration. The United States actually voted against it, but under the United Nations, the migration process has been anything but orderly, Mr. Ortega said. So why do we vote against it? We voted against it because we want the ostensible reason, that is, well, we voted against that, but we have signed on to the United Nations that they're going to manage us, and so the other nations signing on to it saying, here's the compact and here's what's going to happen. So Mr. Ortega said, it's completely opposite right now. He said that through an interpreter. Documents show that in 2023, a record 500,000 migrants traveled through the dense jungle known as the Darien Gap from Colombia into Panama. Migrants from around the world are flying into South and Central America to start their journey because countries such as Suriname and Ecuador don't require a visa to enter. Their final destination is the United States. So who's giving them money to get here? United Nations. Who's giving the United Nations money? You are. So the book, Weapons of Mass Migration, Forced Displacement, Coercion, Foreign Policy, written by Kelly Greenhill, suggests weaker countries are using migration to destabilize their more powerful adversaries. So let's move on with the idea. Mr. Ortega agreed that the NGOs have exacerbated mass migration problems. He says instead of helping, they're being part of the problem. It's not the migrants themselves that are creating a national threat. It's the organized crime. It is these international organizations. That's exactly right. And once again, who's funding them? The United States. At the Lajas Blancas camp in Panama, migrants have access to a number of large maps provided by NGOs that display detailed migration routes heading to the United States. One map is from HIAS, an NGO founded as the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society. Think about that for a moment. The Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, which recently received $11 million from the United States in 2 grants awarded for Latin American migrants. So what's happening here? The United States can, by its representative at the UN, vote against this migration policy that the UN put into place, but at the same time, we are taking our money, giving it to these NGOs such as HIAS, which receives money from us, and granting it to people who are coming over here illegally. The HIAS map shows the migration route from Colombia to Costa Rica, including detailed bus stops, temperatures, altitudes, and a migration kiosk locations. Here's a migration kiosk. You go to a kiosk, just like you go to the airport, you go to the kiosk and they'll take care of you. The Epoch Times visited all 4 migrant camps in the Darien Gap this week, speaking with migrants from China, Somalia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Colombia, and others who hiked out of the treacherous jungle leading from Colombia into Panama. Many suffered from infections, writes the article, and injuries such as trench foot, broken limbs. Several complained that the water was untreated at the camps and they lacked basic items such as diapers. Migrants also told the Epoch Times that the NGO staff, several of which are funded by U.S. taxpayer money, only visited the camps for several hours each day. So Ortega said, I do not know where the funds are going. He's speaking about the funds of the NGOs when they were told about complaints from migrants. The funds are supposed to be there to help the migrants. The only NGO workers spotted during the weekends of February 17 through 18 were the Red Cross, which was building a temporary structure for the workers, and Doctors Without Borders, whose medics were speaking with migrants. The NGOs should be educating and helping migrants in their own countries, not Panama, Ortega said. Remember, he's from Panama. He says, we don't want them here. But instead of curtailing mass migration, he says they are facilitating it. International organizations even filed lawsuits against Panama, alleging human rights violations for holding 2,500 migrants from Haiti. But Ortega said the migrants were only being held because of unsafe conditions. While the UN has aided migrants for decades, the scope of its operation has dramatically expanded with a number of illegal immigrants entering the United States, and that is surging, as we talked about in the last segment, at the request of Joe Biden. Nearly $1.3 billion U.S. taxpayer money was given to the UN and other agencies assisting migrants in 2023, according to government spending databases. The International Organization for Migration, that's the IOM, the UN's migration arm, is paying for the expansion of camps, including one near the Darien Gap, one in Lajas Blancas, another new facility near another camp, Mr. Ortega said. It's up to the NGOs to sustain their operations, he said. So Centerfront, that's a border patrol for Panama, Centerfront, which he once headed, should only be there for security, he said, but not the sponsorship. Ortega said he pushed for the NGOs to be responsible for their own problem that was caused by the global migration. Centerfront should not be the one that does all the processing, attending them, and taking care of them, he said. So here they are in Panama, complaining about the same things that we're complaining about here, but of course, they're only trekking through Panama. Panama has tried to no avail to get governments in South America to provide personal information on migrants who are moving across different countries, he said, but we don't have collaboration because the global compact does not work. That's exactly what the United Nations wants. They want simply crash the gates with the Goths that are coming here. The migrants are fleeing because of issues within their own countries, such as unstable governments or cartel activity. There's a triangle of things that are happening in the central parts of the continent that pushes people out of the country so they can migrate to the United States. In order that mass migration has already caused so many problems in so many countries, including the United States, as we've seen in New York. Bad people are arriving there in New York, and it's not simply New York, ladies and gentlemen, it's all over the country. They're causing damage and a lot of disturbances to the government of the U.S. of America. But that article shows us that this is a planned invasion via the government of the United States, our own government, sponsoring the crashing of the gates by the Goths, the Romans who broke down, there's those who broke down the Roman gates in the 5th century AD. Same thing happening in America. Will we last? We will see.